Pono. Thank you for the invitation to make this presentation. This is a modified version of presentations that I gave to the Board of Land Natural Resources on behalf of the Hawaii o Maui Hikina in April, as well as a presentation we did last month to the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, who took a unanimous position supporting the efforts of Maui County and the East Maui Water Authority to manage the East Maui irrigation system. While I know many of you know the system, I will include some detail because we're being recorded and there might be people who don't know about the East Maui irrigation system who watch this report. It was built in its current form. Most of it was built between the 1870s and the 1920s. It is occasionally referred to as the East Maui Aqueduct System. It was built by the corporate predecessors of what has now become the East Maui Irrigation Company, LLC. This includes both the various sugar plantations that ended up merging together. For decades, it was owned by Alexander and Baldwin, or A&B. In a second transaction in 2025, the entire interest in the East Maui Irrigation Company, LLC, was sold from Alexander and Baldwin to the company doing business as Mahi Pono. I will caution when we talk about EMI and when you hear people in the public talking about EMI, that can refer to the company or to the system. And so it's actually important to be sort of clear and exact in our language. I want to point out before going into the ownership, the issue of taking water off of Crown and Kingdom lands and sending them to Central Maui has been controversial from the initiation of it. This is an image of a petition held in the state archives from 1881, September 12, 1881, written by Hawaiian residents of Ke'anai in the Ko'ola district to the two commissioners of the Crown lands. Attached in the archives is an English translation of the letter, which is in Hawaiian, and it says in part, "We, the committee whose names are below, request your kindness not to dispose of any of the rights of the Crown lands, the water rights of the Crown lands, because what the millionaire has done," and they're referring to Klaus Spreckels, "with the waters of other lands is well known, and account of this trouble," they use the word pilikia, "which is known, that is why we make this application." So I'm just, controversy over how water should be taken and managed out of East Maui is not new. We've been at this for at least 145 years. The system itself is not a single ditch. It's multiple ditches that exist at multiple elevations and sometimes intercepting streams over 4 times. And when it was in full operation, taking the entirety of the base flow of these streams 4 times before those streams reach the ocean. It includes over 50 miles of tunnels. And these data are from the environmental impact statement prepared by A&B for a long-term water license. 50 miles of tunnels, 24 miles of open ditches, inverted siphons and flumes. At full operation, over 400 stream intakes and 8 reservoirs. I'm going to point out this one really critical section of the ditch between these 2 red arrows. This is the Wailoa ditch, which actually goes far into East Maui, into Naihiku. But in this portion between the Honopo Gulch and the Kamole Weir appears to be entirely on land controlled by the East Maui Irrigation Company, LLC. It delivers water to the Kamole Surface Water Treatment Plant, the largest of the county's 3 surface water treatment plants in East Maui, the one that's really the backup, the one that, as you know from your work, is being upgraded so it can treat more water. It also provides water at that point to a great number of the fields controlled by the company doing business as Mahi Pono. So that's the description of the system, but who owns the system itself? To talk about that, we have to talk about who the company doing business as Mahi Pono is. It is owned by a foreign limited liability company, which is a Canadian Crown Corporation, which means it's a company that's actually owned by the Canadian government. Specifically, the name of it is the Canadian Public Sector Pension Investment Board, or goes by PSP. They are the owners of the company doing business as Mahi Pono. They are controlled by a board whose principal business office is in Montreal, in Quebec. They manage about $300 billion of investment. So to us, the $280 million or so that was paid for a 50% interest in the East Maui Irrigation Company and 41,000 acres of land is like a lot of money, right? For them, it's a very, very small portion of their investment portfolio. The company doing business as Mahi Pono says that they own the system itself. On their website, they have FAQs. One of the FAQs does Mahi Pono own and manage East Maui Irrigation? They say in 2019, we obtained a 50% ownership of the system. Also, when we presented at the request of the Board of Land Natural Resources, when the East Maui Water Authority and the Ahawaii Maui Hikina presented to the Board of Land Natural Resources on progress on our efforts, written testimony was sent by the company doing business as Mahi Pono to BLNR. And in that letter, among the things they said was, quote, EMI owns the ditch system and has no intention of selling it. Now, the Department of Land and Natural Resources seems to agree with this assessment, at least in their written records. As recently as in December 2025, when the revocable permit was coming in front of BLNR for renewal, they said, quote, in June 2025, Mahi Pono LLC acquired A and B's remaining interest in EMI, giving them full ownership of EMI. The Attorney General for the state of Hawaii seems to agree with this claim that the company doing business as Mahi Pono owns the ditch system. Mahina Poi Poi, who is a representative for the island of Molokai and East Maui, introduced House Bill 2434 in the past legislative session, which would have given, among other things, the counties a right of first refusal to the disposal of any government water resources by the state. Specifically, it would have applied in this case. Before they can do a long-term license, they'd have to offer it to a private company. They'd have to offer it to the county. The state's attorney general testified at that hearing, and this person said the county, they testified against the bill passing, and in fact, the bill was held based on the testimony of the state. And this attorney general said the county would have to show that they're in the process of, because these are not public infrastructure, right? So they'd have to prove that they're in the process of eminent domain so that they can take over the infrastructure of the system. So she was saying, this is privately owned, it's not owned by the state. The county would actually have to start condemnation proceedings in order to take over the system. The Board of Land and Natural Resources has never challenged this. Among the documents approved by BLNR was the final environmental impact statement prepared by Alexander and Baldwin in preparation for getting a long-term license. That document says, in part, for more than a century, the East Maui watershed forests have provided water for off-stream uses through a surface water diversion system known as the EMI aqueduct system. The EMI aqueduct system is owned and operated by the East Maui Irrigation Company. And when we were first created as a board, our first official action, really practically, maybe it's our second after electing our chair and vice chair, was to write a letter to Don Chang. We said, hey, want to let you officially know we've been created by the County of Maui. We're ready to start discussions. Please, can we start a discussion about taking over the system? And when 4 months later, Don Chang finally replied to us, among the statements she said was, quote, the department does not own the water diversion and transmission system. The system is privately owned by the East Maui Irrigation Company, which holds a perpetual easement for portions of the system located on state land. Consequently, the department cannot facilitate any transfer of the system itself. So she said basically, among other things, you're asking for us for the system, but we can't give it to you because we don't own it. The question that we've come to ask is that actually correct? There's a number of ways to think about this. The first question we should ask is who owns the land and water involved? The vast majority of the land is state land. I put this in quotes because it's actually Crown and Kingdom lands to which there is still unsettled native land claims. So in this image, which is from the EIS, the dark green are Crown and Kingdom lands held as state ceded lands in the public land trust. Within the red outline, the light yellow part are the lands that were controlled by Alexander and Baldwin and now are mostly controlled by the company doing business as Mahi Pono. Of this, 33,000 acres of the traditional license area that's been under control are state lands. About 17,000 acres are private lands. The vast majority of water transferred from the system comes off of state lands, not off of these privately owned lands. From the monthly data that Mahi Pono submits to the county as a condition of the revocable permit for every year, looking at the numbers from January through November of 2025, on average, just over 24 million gallons a day came from state lands, only 1.5 million came from lands that they clearly control. So the vast majority of the water, the vast majority of the land is state lands, the vast majority of the water comes off of state lands. Then there's also, of course, as you well know, the public trust doctrine. There's no such thing as company-owned water in Hawaii. This is based, among other places, Article 11, Section 1 of the state constitution, which says all public natural resources are held in trust by the state for the benefit of the people. Okay, so that's who owns the land and who owns the water. Who owns the actual system itself? Who owns the ditch? To understand that, we have to look at what were historically these 4 license areas, going from east to west: Nahiku, Honolulu, Ke'anai, and Huelo. These license areas for these Crown and Kingdom lands that were held by the territory and now by the state were set up in a 1938 agreement between the territory of Hawaii and the East Maui Irrigation Company. This agreement was signed in March of 1938 and amended once to change a couple words. It's also known as the East Maui Water Agreement. And again, it's between the territory and the East Maui Irrigation Company. It defined the 4 license areas because there had been a whole bunch of licenses before for different areas among multiple companies. It exchanged certain rights between the parties. It proposed an upset price for how much the company would be charged for water coming off of these lands based on the price of sugar. In that agreement, the territory granted to East Maui Irrigation a perpetual easement to convey all water now or hereafter owned by the company, which I put in italics and underlined, right, because that doesn't make any legal sense anymore. There's no such thing as company-owned water, but at the time they thought there was. To convey all water now or hereafter owned by the company, and all water covered by any license now held by the company or which in the future may be granted jointly with the territory without charge through any or all aqueducts now or hereafter crossing government lands situated in East Maui from Nahiku to Honopo. And from EMI to the territory, since you see on that land ownership map, they own some sort of things, it gives to the territory the ability to convey water jointly with the company without any charge through the aqueducts crossing the company's lands. Again, from Nahiku to Honopo. The last time water licenses were issued for these 4 areas, or on this slide, there was one in 1954 for the Ke'anai area that expired in 1971, for Nahiku that expired in 1976, for Huelo that expired in 1981, and for Honolulu that expired in 1986. And all 4 have nearly identical provisions in them. And when I say nearly identical, I mean like there's a case in which one hyphenates a word that's not hyphenated otherwise. So they're basically identical. This is the image of the provisions in the Ke'anai license, and all of them have these reversion provisions, which state as follows. For the Ke'anai, upon the termination of this license, by the lapse of time for any other cause, so it elapsed in 1971, all improvements now or hereafter erected on the license area, including the whole of such aqueduct system, and all the extensions thereof and improvements made thereto, shall revert to and become the sole property of the licensor. In this case, the licensor was the territory, became the state. So the entire aqueduct system on the Ke'anai license area, according to this, became the property of the territory and not the state. Same thing for Nahiku, same thing for Huelo, same thing for Honolulu. Except for this part, right? So the license area in the 1938 agreement covers from Nahiku to Honopo, but not this little stretch, which is for the county super critical because we can't get water to the Kamoli treatment plant without access to that ditch. So based on the above, who owns the system? Almost all the land, state land. Almost all the water is coming off of state land. There's no such thing as private water. All the aqueducts in the license area revert to the state. And the state actually, under the 1938 agreement, even on the privately owned land, has the right to transmit water over that entire area. The one thing that the Public Sector Pension Investment Board clearly owns is the Wailoa Ditch between Honopo and Kamole. So does this matter? For this last week's provision or proposal from the staff to the Board of Land Natural Resources, they used the fact that the company seems to own this portion alone as one of the reasons for rejecting the county's request to take over this system. It also matters really significantly to the Department of Hawaiian Homelands and OHA and to the general public. If a water license is issued, so if the county is not successful in getting a set aside and a water license is issued, 50% of the license revenue is supposed to go to the general fund, 30% goes to the Department of Hawaiian Homelands under a provision of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act, 20% goes to the Office of Hawaiian Affairs because it comes from the so-called ceded lands. The state has not done an appraisal yet, but if the state actually owns the ditch system, the appraised price for using it would be much, much higher than if it's owned by the company, as DLNR, the BLNR, their attorney generals, and the company has asserted for many years. It also really matters in terms of all of us who want to make sure that this system continues to operate and gets water to central Maui and is well maintained. Is it maintained well? If it's the state asset, if the state actually owns it, what is the state doing to make sure that the permit holder is really preserving that asset for the future? That's it. Pao, happy to answer any questions. I saw I took about 16 minutes, so I'm glad I didn't go over the 20 minutes I estimated.
Thank you, Dr. Schroyer, for your presentation. We will now take testimony on this item. Do we have any testifiers?
No testifiers, Chair.
Thank you. I don't see any in chat. With no objections, I will close testimony on this item at 2:12 p.m. Members, questions for Dr. Schroyer. I think I see member Hely first. Or was it member
No, I think
Botello?
member Botello's first.
Oh, okay. Member Botello.
Right. First of all, I just want to thank you for such a thorough report. Secondly, is it available anywhere for the public? Because this is a really thorough, as much as possible, history that, up until now has been a lot of verbal history, but in my family anyway. But is this available for just like the general public to read or take a look at, or because it's a concise history of maps and things like that. That would be I think it would be interest to the public to have access to.
Mahalo, Member Botello. So in a couple ways, the presentation itself was submitted as an attachment to you. So it's not part of your guys' official record, and anybody in the public can be pointed to it as well as watching this recording. The source documents, many of the source documents came from research done by Kipa and Onauna Maoli, who have done tremendous work documenting the cultural history of Maui Hikina and the history of struggles over water. The East Maui Water Authority on its website has actually put up a lot of those original documents. So you can see these petitions, you can see a lot of the maps and these other things. And those are available now through the EMWA's website as well. So I hope that's responsive to your question. Mahalo.
Member Hely?
Thank you. Thank you very much for that terrific presentation and all that work. I mean, that's a tremendous amount of work. So I have a question regarding, I think, your second or third to last slide, the one about fees. I didn't quite understand it. I wonder if you could put it up again.
Yes, I will put it up. So a water license is a charge for getting the right to use the system and use the water.
Okay, before you start
Um,
that though, so what is this that matters? Who gets the license?
who owns the system?
Of course that
So
matters. Okay.
the
Yeah, yeah.
question is, well, so the Board of Land Natural Resources has behaved this entire time, along with the department and their attorney general and their previous chair. They have accepted the fact as asserted that it is privately owned. The previous TIG for this board that ended up resulting in the creation of the East Maui Water Authority did sort of start to raise some of these issues. But because most of the fights over the years have been over how much water is diverted by the system, the ownership issue didn't really come to a head until the county formally asked for a set aside of the land. And the issue of ownership didn't come in front of the Board of Land Natural Resources until April of this year. But even in last week, they're dodging the issue. They're not even saying, listen, we don't have to resolve this issue of ownership. We can just give a license to the company doing business as Mahi Pono. So the question I'm asking is it important? And I think it's important for the county getting an issue. But even if the outcome of all of this, and sorry, I wasn't clear on this before, even if the outcome of all of this is that the company doing business as Mahi Pono ends up with a 30-year license, you still need to know who owns the ditch system itself, because the state has to price the license through an appraisal. And if you don't know who owns the ditch itself, you will price that very, very differently. And that's going to, among other things, affect the financial rights held by the Department of Hawaiian Homelands and its beneficiaries, and the Office of Hawaiian Affairs and its beneficiaries, as well as the other 50% goes to watershed protection and other state uses. So it matters to sort of the general state's population. Is that clearer, Member Hely? Sorry, I was confusing before.
Much clearer. That's I kind of got the drift that was what was implied here, but I appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Thank you.
Members, any more questions? No. Vice Chair?
I just wanted to say a huge mahalo, Jonathan, for your presentation and for illuminating the many challenges that exist in this space. Really appreciate that information. So I just want to say thank you.
Mahalo.
I would also like to say thank you. There's very lots of information, more information to absorb today. And yeah, and bringing this to light, it's important for all of us to know. Yeah, so thank you for doing all this work and all this research and and compiling this presentation for us and sharing this today. Any other members have anything else? No. Okay.
Thank you very much. I will stay on as long as I can off camera to listen to your important discussions coming forward. Thank you for the work you do, and thank you for the invitation to present to you on this. It would be, if I can make two concluding remarks. One is, yeah, if the system's worth, as has been alleged, a couple $100 million, it'd be good to know whether the state gave it away or not. Gave away a $200 million asset. Secondly, part of the frustration of the board 4 times coming forward to try and give away this license in the last 2 years, there's nothing the courts have ever said in a final decision, and there's no legal requirement that they have to issue a long-term license. By way of contrast, hinting at your next agenda items, the State Water Commission is supposed to act within no later than 180 days on water use permits, which, among other things, the Department of Water Supply is hoping for in West Maui. So we have these 2 sister agencies, the BLNR and the Water Commission. They're supposed to be doing something in West Maui that they are not doing, and they don't need to be doing something on East Maui that they keep pursuing. I hope that we can collectively work to get them to focus on the things that they're supposed to be doing. Mahalo nui. Aloha.
Aloha. Thank you.